guys, it's Emma here at T12 Blackpool, and today I'm going to talk to you about stretching. So stretching is something that tends to be overlooked in a lot of people's workouts, and I get why. It is kind of boring, but it's still really important. And it's important because it allows us to get the most out of our workouts. If we stretch, we're going to be able to hit full range of motion when we're working. It also means that we're less likely to get injured. So if we think about our muscle, when a muscle's working, when we want to perform any movement, we need the muscle to contract. So here's the muscle lengthened, and then the muscle contracts, and that's where we get our movement. If our muscles are tight, they're in a slightly shortened position already, so when we contract the muscle, it doesn't have as far to go, and we're not going to get as much work out of the muscle. If we lengthen the muscle back out, we get a maximal contraction when we contract the muscle. So that's why it's really important to stretch. It also helps to prevent, to some degree, muscle imbalance by making sure that our muscles work efficiently. So let's have a look at some stretches that we can do. And you can perform these stretches at the end of your workout. If your coach hasn't had time to cool you down, just go into a quiet corner, 5-10 minutes, stretch in, and away you go. Or you could even perform these stretches at home. Instead of sitting watching TV, while you're watching TV, do some stretches. Just take a look. First stretch that we're going to look at today is the quad stretch. So we lie on our sides. Now you can either set it up with the elbow under the shoulder, or if it's more comfortable, you can extend the arm and just rest your head down onto your arm. We want to think about taking the knees together, pushing the hips forward, but lengthening through the front of the leg. Now we want to hold all of our stretches for about 30 seconds, and then perform the same stretch on the other side. So that's quads. Let's take a look at hip flexors next. I'm going to remove my jacket for this stretch so that you can see my back. So for our hip flexor stretch, we want to take one leg forward, so we've got 90 degrees in each knee. Most important thing here is to think about tucking the hips under. So the tailbone tucks under. Lift through the chest, and then we can lean slightly forward. We could maybe even raise the back arm to get more of a deeper stretch at the top of the hip flexor. You'll note my back keeps a neutral curve. What we don't want to do with this stretch, and what might tend to happen to compensate if we're tight through the hip, is this. See how my lower back has hyperextended? I'm now not really effectively stretching my hip. Better to come here and be more upright and really focus on tucking the hips under to give me that stretch through the hip flexor right at the top of the thigh. Right now I can feel it pulling as I tuck my hip under and lift through my chest. If you want a little bit extra from this stretch, you can think about squeezing your butt cheek as you hold. So there's hip flexors. Hamstring is our next stretch. I'll show you in standing, because I think standing is probably the best way to perform this particular stretch. Now most people, when they do a hamstring stretch in standing, will tip from the hip first. Their front leg is straight and their back leg is bent. That's okay, but there is a better way to perform this stretch, and we're going to take a look at that now. A better way to perform this stretch is to take one leg slightly forward, feet are hip width apart. From here, I bend both knees. After I've bent my knees, I tip my chest forward. From here, I then try to straighten my front leg, keeping the front knee slightly soft, thinking about lifting my tailbone up and back. See how I've kept a neutral spine by keeping my chest lifted? I'm not allowing my posture to collapse. From this position with this hamstring stretch, we can get a deeper stretch into the belly of the muscle rather than that kind of burning sensation that we sometimes get at the back of the knee if we perform this stretch the other way that I showed you first. So that's a really good stretch for hamstrings. Let's have a look at a stretch for the calf, the soleus stretch. So we want to take one foot so that the toe is level with the knee. Lifted through the chest, reach down towards the floor, and if you can't touch the floor, that's okay, it doesn't really matter. You're aiming to try and press the heel of this front leg down towards the floor. And that's a stretch for the soleus, the bottom of the calf. Take a look from the side. This is how it looks. Toe level with knee. Chest is lifted, reach towards the floor. Again, we don't want the posture to collapse. The chest stays lifted with a neutral spine. Try to press that front heel down towards the floor, and you'll feel a real deep stretch in the back of the calf. All right, next up, glutes. So a really good stretch for our glutes is a stretch called the hurdle stretch. 90 degrees in each knee. We want to think about hinging from the hip and tipping the chest forward. Again, the shoulders want to stay back to help us keep good posture and keep a neutral spine. Now you might find as you hold the stretch that you could walk your hands a little bit further, that you can drop your chest a little bit lower towards the knee. That's going to give us a stretch into our glutes and into our hips. You can experiment a little bit with this stretch. You can maybe walk the hands over to one side and then walk the hands over to the other side. And that's going to hit the deep rotators of the hip as well as the glutes. Next up, let's move on to the upper body. So, upper back, hands together. We want to tuck the chin, and this time we do want to round the shoulders. Almost like you're giving someone a really big hug. Think about separating your shoulder blades, pulling them apart to release your upper back. A stretch for your lats that I find a really good stretch. We come into what we call child's pose. So sit the heels, the glutes back onto the heels. Take one arm to the center and then think about pulling your body away to that side. So if my right arm is to the center, I pull my body away to the right and hold the stretch. Again, about 30 seconds on each side, and then swap over. If my left arm's to the center, I pull my body away to the left. And that's a great stretch for the lats. A great stretch for our inner thigh, which is an area that perhaps we neglect a little bit with stretching. Take a look. Hips are square. Lower yourself down onto your elbows. This leg is straight. Now you might find that you can't come onto your elbows. That's absolutely fine. You can stay on the palm of your hand, and that might be enough of a stretch into the inner thigh and the groin for you. Trying to keep your toes in your peripheral vision. And of course the option is to come down onto the elbows. Again, the hips stay square, and once again we're trying to keep a neutral spine. We'd hold that stretch for 30 seconds, and then of course we would repeat on the other side. Shoulders. Take one arm across, close to the body. Use the opposite hand to pull the shoulder in, and we should feel a stretch in the back of the shoulder. 30 seconds each side, repeat. For our chest, 2 variations of chest stretch. Take the elbows out wide and open out through the chest, and you'll get a stretch into the front of the shoulder as well. We can also reach behind. Think about squeezing the elbows in and down as you lift through the chest. You can do this standing or kneeling. And again, we want to hold that for about 30 seconds. One area that we might neglect to stretch that I think is really important is down the sides of our body, the obliques, and a little bit into the side of our hips. So you can do this stretch in standing, or you can do it kneeling down. Let's show you in standing. Take one foot behind, press both heels down, arm comes up. Push the hips across and tip the upper body over. So you should feel a stretch down the side of the body and a little bit into the side of the hip. If you want more, try to walk the fingers of the opposite hand down your thigh. Again, we want to hold for about 30 seconds, and then we'll repeat the same stretch on the other side. Heels down, hips push across, reach up and over. Initially, we want to lift the rib cage, But as we get into the stretch, settle the ribs back down. So that's just some basic stretches. Obviously, there's lots of other stretches we can do as well. We can stretch our triceps, maybe a good stretch for our biceps, loads of stretches that you might want to experiment with. But the main muscle groups, especially if you're pushed for time, are the ones that are the really important stretches to do. 30 seconds, hold the stretch, make sure that you breathe through the stretch. That's really important. We don't want to hold our breath when we stretch. Try and relax as much as you can into the stretch. Don't fight it.